50% of out-of-school children, more than 50% actually, live in conflict and fragile states. The countries, the individuals here represent countries that have some of the most affected children. So I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion around their own personal experiences as well as the activities that they're engaged in and how that might have implications for policy and programming development as we move forward on this agenda. My name is Maysa Jalbout. I'm a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Institution. I work on education issues in the Arab world and globally. I happen to be very passionate about the issue of education in fragile states. It affects the Arab world hugely. More than 80% of the out-of-school children in the Middle East and North Africa live in conflict-affected countries. And that number is not going down. The numbers of out-of-school children from Syria, which now are over 3 million, probably the biggest crisis of education anywhere in the world. It's unprecedented. I was just in Lebanon, actually, surveying the progress on the challenge there, because there are over 400,000 children out of school as a result of the crisis from Syria. And I can tell you that we have not yet, on a global level or a country level, figured out the best way to ensure that children are not affected for a very long time when they face a crisis as such. Most of the children who are in Lebanon, who are refugees from Syria, whether they're Syrians or other nationalities, have been out of school for almost 4 years, now going on to the 5th year. There are many challenges. Some of them have to do with funding. Others have to do with coordination on the ground. Some of it has to do with not knowing how to reach some of the children. And others have to do with the lack of capacity to implement at such large scale. I think all of those issues are going to come up today. But what's very interesting about our panel is that some of them are early on in their experience in dealing with this issue, and others have been working at it for a very long time. The contexts are very different, but I think there will be common issues that will come up. We have prepared some questions for the panelists, but I'd like to leave as much room as possible for you to ask them questions as well, and for us to have more of a dialogue and perhaps even a debate. So I will start with His Excellency, the Minister of General Education, Science and Technology from South Sudan. His Excellency has been a minister for a year and a half, perhaps undoubtedly actually, having one of the most challenging education portfolios in the world. More than 50% of children in South Sudan are out of school, and it remains having a very small budget for education. Some exciting stuff happening, though, in Sudan. I was just researching some of that and would love to learn more about the Back to Learning campaign and the progress that has been made over the last couple of years. The minister is a former ambassador and has worked, like myself, in Jordan and has gone to university at the American University of Beirut, also like Abdulsalam. So he has a very broad experience, and I'm sure we'll have a very enriched discussion. Mr. Etienne is someone who's had a huge impact on the education system in Haiti. He has been introducing a very strong focus on science and technology, and has really been trying to look at the best ways to engage children, not only in their own curriculum, but in how they can have an impact and help rebuild Haiti. He organizes science fairs and many other projects that focus on leadership and creativity and empathy. And of course, he was a finalist in the Teacher Prize, which I think we should give them a round of applause again for. Aziz is a leading advocate for equal access to primary and secondary education, including girls. He founded a school for Afghan refugees in 1994 that today has over 3,000 students. He's written many textbooks, and I understand he has a best-selling book, which I'm now eager to read, about his memoirs. And of course, he is also a Teacher Prize finalist. And last but not least, my friend Abdulsalam Haykal, who leads a business group with active media and technology. His company creates high-quality Arabic content, and he's just informed me that they're now going to be producing the Arabic version of the Harvard Business Review. He sits on several university boards, including the American University of Beirut, the University of Kalamoon in Syria, and the Earth University in Costa Rica. Abdulsalam is personally engaged in refugee education and is very passionate about it, and I commend him as a business person to be involved. I think we need many more business people to be engaged in such an important issue. So without a further ado, I think we are eager to start the discussion. As I mentioned, I think that we'd like to hear from you, have a combination of your own experiences on the ground, but also a reflection on what you think this means for changing the architecture of refugee education and education in fragile states. Any recommendations that you would like to be picked up for further discussion? If we could start off with you, Minister, tell us a little bit about what's happening in education in Sudan and what you think are the most challenging aspects of dealing with a system that is still yet fragile and needs a lot of support and capacity development in order to absorb all of the out-of-school children.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to share with colleagues some of the challenges we are facing, and indeed even some of the opportunities we have found out as we moved on. South Sudan is a state that was carved out of Sudan as a country. And as such, from technical perspective, it's supposed to be part of a country that existed for over 50 years. But given the history of the conflict in Sudan for over 50 years, one aspect of it was that South was underdeveloped, and as such, the infrastructure for all the institutions in South Sudan were not necessarily up to the challenge given the crisis. And as such, when South Sudan became independent, 3 years, immediately 2 years after that, internal conflict arose. And one of the affected areas definitely was the education system in the country. The most affected areas were, we have 10 states, so we roughly have 3 states that were directly affected, plus the internal displacement that took place. And as such, the immediate problem that occurred was that we were not able to trace 800,000 students. And it took us about 4 months through a survey and together with partners to be able to find out that about 400 of them were back into education system, and then we remained with 400,000. So the immediate thing was insecurity was a serious problem because it implied that children need to be safe. Second problem was the movement of the children and their teachers and their parents within the country, outside, is difficult for you to trace them. This was naturally so. The other thing is, even if you were able to trace them, the teachers who are supposed to teach them now need to be trained, wherever they are, at least the basic training. In some instances where we were able to identify some of the teachers within South Sudan, moving from one place to another implied that their salaries has to be moved to another part of the city. But I think what we have done as a country was that immediately we decided as a government that education must be excluded from the conflict. And then we immediately called all the partners, particularly UNICEF and others, told them, look, any South Sudanese, wherever that child is, give them access. And as such, we were able to conduct examination across, even in refugee camps in neighboring countries. So that decision was good, because it implied now that the education is no longer part of the conflict. And as such, examination could be taken from what is perceived to be government control areas to the borders where the rebels control, and then it was able. But I think the main objective was to make sure that children are safe, and to make sure also that wherever they are, they have access. Another problem we faced in that particular time during the conflict, we discovered that a huge number of refugee children were affected, because once the country has a problem, how do we deal with this? So we then said, particularly the delivery of the teaching material like books and so on, we were able to ask the UNHCR, because they're using our national curriculum, to print the books, and from our side, the access we had, we gave it to them. So we have double work: internally displaced, who are South Sudanese, and those South Sudan who went to other countries. So we have to make sure that we give them books for the transition until they settle that. And then the refugees within South Sudan who were affected directly or indirectly by this. So the culmination of all these challenges is that you were able, through policies and decisions, to transform this from being a pure challenge to a collective responsibility of everybody involved, but government leading in terms of policy, so that nobody is victimized, as whether a child or a teacher. It was quite an interesting thing. But then we have other programs that we had to put in place, and we'll have a chance to discuss them.
Very good. Guy, would you like to share with us what you think are the challenges today for Haiti's education system, and where it needs to be going in the context of getting more out-of-school children back into school, and how can the international community help with these goals?
Well, when I begin to manage the Collège 4 Pressoir, I understand that the big problem is qualification of teacher. We don't have really teacher qualifying. It's also economical problem, because it's difficult to have pedagogical materials, and there is also instability politic, because about the political situation, it's really very, very hard. And for example, when I decide to open a chemistry lab, the government said no, because if there is a political trouble, if there is the bomb, if there is the grenade, you will be responsible. It was very hard for me to explain them that it's not for the political trouble that I want to open a chemistry lab. It was very difficult. And finally, I decided to change really the strategy that we use in my school. About the science, we decide at the end of each year to organize a science fair where each student have to present their dream, his dream, about the development of the community. And we choose a theme for the year, and we divide each class in the group, and each group have to do research about the theme. And we consider this work like the final exam in science. And the role of teacher is changed. It's not a teacher that who have to do a training vertically. The teacher will convert to the guide. The teachers have to work with their students, think with their students. And at the end of the year, when we finish to work for the science fair, we invite population during 2 open days in my school. And generally, we receive approximately 4,000 and 5,000 people. But each project have to have a relation between the curriculum, official curriculum, and particularly with a need of development of the community. For example, in 2002, no traffic light worked in Haiti. After 20 years without working, a group of students decided to repair them. And it was their physics exam. It was necessary for them to go to the street to repair this traffic light. But the problem was the authority. It was necessary for them to have authorization from the mayor, from the police national, and it was a part of their exam in social science, how they have to go to talk to these responsible. So everything we do in my school, students have to know how they can apply to solve a problem in this community. And after the repair this traffic light, the government said to Minister of Public Work, it's not possible that the students repair a traffic light and it's your job. So you have to repair all traffic light in the country. After 1 year, we don't know why exactly. Someone cut the cable because our students installed the batteries and the inverter in my school, and they pass a cable from my school to the corner, and we don't know why exactly. They cut the cable, and the students said, okay, we are going to propose another possibility to, for what this light to work. And they imagine the solar panel, the energy solar, to aliment the traffic light. And now we have approximately 150 traffic lights that work in Haiti. And the students, a group of students, decide to build a robot to clean the street because they said there are too many people to clean the street manually, so they suggest a robot to clean the street, and they suggest in the same time the possibility for those people on the street to go to school to learn something. Amazing. And they offer this robot to the mayor in Port-au-Prince. And the last year, some students imagine a camera to control the street by internet, and they offer this camera to the Police National, to the Minister of Interior. And after this kind of teaching, we decide to install in my school, to introduce in my school, entrepreneurship class. Why? You know, Haiti have a big economical problem. So we think that it's not possible for the students to learn during 13 years and after that they can't do anything with their knowledge. So we introduce entrepreneurship class. The objective is, after 4 years, students have to put their knowledge together to open the small enterprise. And now in my school, we have 4 bakeries in the secondary school. During a chemistry class, they learn how to prepare the bread. And now we have 4 bakeries in my school, and the students have authorization to sell their bread in my school. And now they sell their bread outside of the school also. And we think that everything that our students learn in my school, they have to know how they can apply them. And now we train another school in the country to do the same thing like us.
I think what's really interesting about what you're saying is that you've decided that education is paramount to their future, not only personally, but for rebuilding and strengthening Haiti. The sense is that they're working on these small projects that do have an impact, but that they can also become leaders and solution makers in your country. And I think this is perhaps an underestimated role of education, particularly in fragile states, and we need to put more of an emphasis on it. The role of education in peace building as well as building a future state. And I'm sure the other panelists will have something to say about that. Aziz, one of the things that makes you a remarkable teacher is the fact that you've been exceptionally persistent in the face of so many challenges. Can you tell us what you think is or are some of the opportunities, perhaps, because we keep talking about challenges, around scaling up some of these efforts? You're reaching 3,000 kids. Obviously, we need to keep going. What do you think can be done to help initiatives such as yours scale up to more students?
Thank you. I think the stories that we heard here, it brings us together for one specific point. The rule of authority is very important because they are the one to set goals for the people and to direct every moment of the people's life. I have similar experiences with my authority. For example, we came to start our work in a country that has just come out of war with a culture of violence, hatred, pessimism. And we had to help the community at large to go on to think about their, the cost that they had paid for nothing. They wish to have justice, for example. That was an ideological claim started by the time of the communists. Then it was even followed by the Islamists as well, calling for justice. Then it came to become specific ethnic justice, for example. The people wanted to that. But at the end of the day, all groups, especially people, they found that they have gotten nothing, but they had paid a huge price. All the country had gotten distracted and smashed. Millions of people had lost their lives, and everything had been lost. But in return, we had nothing when the Taliban regime collapsed. When I entered firstly in 2002, early in 2002, into Kabul, you could not find even a single place to go and to live, to pass your one night there. So for us, it was an important issue, how to mobilize the community to come forward, not to look for the assistance of the foreigners, to come and do something that is their job. We went there. For example, we talked with the community to persuade them to pay for the tuition of their kids, even at an amount of 60 AFs at that time, $1 per month. It was very, difficult for these poor families even to think about $1 to pay a month for the tuition of their kids. We went on and we persuaded the community to contribute with that. Even sometimes we would urge them to pay at least even 10 hours at that time. That could be, 10% of the tuition fee, just to think that they are the owner of something that they are creating. We went on with the encouragement, encouraging of the families to send their daughters to school. Then we created this mixed classes just to help the students to practice a natural interaction while they were normally, doing the class activities there. And we had a marvelous, really, impact through that in the community. We faced no problem between the students themselves, nor any reaction from the community. Even we had lots of cases that the mothers would come and sit in the parent session. They would pray for the great impacts that they had gotten, through the good education, good behaviors of their kids there. We authored this civic education textbooks that would help the students to change their mindset, to change their vision in very critical way, but with very basic steps, just to think that who they are, what are the the differences between them, and what are the shared points. We went on, and it also brought a marvelous change that our students could easily talk even about God, for example, about religious issues, about the relations between different ethnic communities, faith group. They were completely normal, as the other school, issues or problems. We went on to talk about human rights, about democracy as a system which is protecting the human rights of the people. Then we came to even to define, help the students to define their own meaning in the community, to come into even interpret Quran, to talk about that easily. If it is really a book of guidance, it is for me, it is for us. How can we find this guidance there? And we have to think about that. These were very simple issues that the students would talk easily, and they would write in detail about that. But when it went to the Minister of Education, I would now count that how the Minister of Education and the government posed restrictions on us. Firstly, we wanted to get registered in the Ministry of Education to send the first groups of our students to go to university. They forced us to separate boys from the girls, and we resisted for 1 year, arguing that if the students do not have problem, if the community doesn't have a problem, if we have faced, seen this marvelous impact here, what is now, the anxiety, the reason for anxiety of the government? They didn't accept any argument, and at the end, they had a very simple sentence for us. Either separate boys from the girls or forget about registration. So we came and we gave up that. Then they stepped forward to come for our civic education programs. And they called that they are preaching Christianity, they are preaching secularism, they are preaching Darwinism, they are preaching communism, and all sorts of these isms, just to force us to stop this education. Why? Because they were saying that this is not a norm in our education system. You cannot, expand it in the other parts of the country, so we would not allow you to do that. And in 2010, I had a series of discussions with them. When they even, for 3 hours, they got convinced that it was something good. And they even called us as the respectable intellectuals of the community and that. But after 2 months, they issued a decree from the councils of ulama, we call that, the councils of the clergy. Again, they excommunicated the school and sent as a decree that their school should be banned, their books should be confiscated, and all the teachers should be sent to the court because they are preaching. I was at that time on a fellowship in NED in Washington. Then I asked my student, the faculty, that they should stop these subjects and tell them that I was responsible for everything. When I returned back, I would go and solve the issue. So when they stopped these subjects, then they forgot everything, and they even didn't mention that you had been, infidels or doing something wrong here in the school. This was the same with other, we call that extracurricular activities in the school. We had students' parliament, still we have maintained that. We have radio that is all run by the students. We have music department or art gallery. And for all these programs, extracurricular activities, we are facing every day restriction from the Ministry of Education, and even they're not ready to listen for a single moment what we are doing there. So I'm coming to this point that it shows that we are now facing with an old and traditional type of mindset in the authority that they're paying a lot. They're really paying a very huge cost for the system of education in the country. But in return, they're not thinking about a single achievement. Every year, they claim that more than 8 million students are now going to school. It means that the budget should be allocated for 8 million students, and all the facilities should be provided for them. But at the end of the year, you have hundreds of thousands of these students that they just become to the enemies of everything, because they are going to the university, and out of 300,000 students, just 40,000 can go to the universities, and the rest of them come back with a complex, and they are full of hatred, full of pessimism and frustration just on the streets. So they turn to be terrorists, they turn to be suicidal attackers, they can be targets of the fanatical groups and so on. But the government is not thinking even for a single moment about these kinds of approaches that they have. It might be a surprise for you that I ran for the Global Teacher Prize in my country. I came all the way to be one of the top 50 finalists there. I announced that through my Facebook page, and I received a huge amount of applause from different individuals throughout the country and even from around the world. But in my country, even I did not receive a single phone call from one individual to congratulate me for that. I didn't receive even a single sentence from the press of my country to say that there had been something happening in the country. Nothing for that. It went on, and I became one of the top 10 finalists. I sent invitation cards for all these people, including the president of my country, that he is a close friend of mine, and also he was a board member of our school. He is now there, and he has gone there with a huge support of myself. I was the one to help him writing his election manifesto and the manifesto that he is now using for his government. That is 350 pages. I and him, we worked together for that. And now he is there, and he didn't even call me to say congratulations. I was expecting him to, even come and participate in this global education and skill forum here, because it was a marvelous, platform for him to talk about his vision as the president of this new Afghanistan, we call that. But he didn't mention even a single thing on Afghan national TV, on Afghan national press there. I came to this global teacher competition here, but no one from my country even asked me what is going on there, or how they can cover, the reports of that. What does it mean? For me, it is not a surprise, because I feel that if my work is something marvelous, or it has something as a strength, it is in this context that I do not receive even a single institutional protection for my work, nor from any important source there. But I have mobilized the community to come forward. So the challenge now here is how to really regard this restriction as a reality there. To think that, yes, it is a matter to think about, yes? We have to find a solution. I'm not upset with the type of behaviors of the authority, nor from the president or the clergy and others. But it brings me to think deeply about the solutions for that. That is something that has made my experience in Afghanistan something interesting, because I have been thinking about the cost of any of my achievements. And this is my notion here. Now, again, I have to think that if the government is not happy with our works or is not paying any attention to that, so how can we go on to persuade them that it is at their own benefit? They can use this method and vision to ease their own work, to rule the country, to govern the people. So I think for us all, maybe the other colleagues will talk a little bit more about that, to utilize this platform of the Education Forum and scale here to open a dialogue with the authorities, not to challenge them, but to help them to think that they are paying a lot, they have huge investments for education, but they're not thinking on the better ways to have good achievements out of that.
So you touched on many issues. I picked up on several themes, the importance of local ownership for success, the fact that there's a huge opportunity in fragile states to significantly improve the quality of the education in that initial period. But that also faces resistance, and it's difficult to receive support and to be able to scale up. And I think, in the next kind of round of discussions, we really need to speak about how you scale up these successful initiatives and model them around the country and maybe even around the world. You also talked about the fact that there's still a long way to go. And I think what's very interesting about the context of education in fragile states is that there's a huge amount of focus on the issue at the time of the emergency and perhaps for the next few years from the international community and nationally. And then that starts to drop off and countries start focusing, donor countries start focusing on other issues, other emergencies. So what happens in that period and what kind of support is needed to continue that process? Getting kids into school is the first step, but it doesn't end there. Abdulsalam, for Syrian children, it's still an emergency, but where we've just entered the 5th year, unfortunately, a very sad anniversary. So for many kids, they're in their 4th year of being out of school. And so it's now moved from being an emergency to becoming a longer term issue. We know, based on international experience, that refugees, on average, stay something like 17 years as refugees. What do you think are the immediate issues that need to be dealt with both inside Syria and for refugee countries for education? What do you think should the region, the international community, and Syrians themselves be doing about it?
Maysa, I come from a country that is one of the oldest countries in the world and one that has sent educators to several parts of the world as well. Syrian educators went to Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and the Gulf for many years, ever since the 1930s and 40s. Now we're faced with a situation where we're not actually able to educate our own children. The Syrian case is massive in a way that is intimidating. The number of children that continue to exit the country into refugee camps, whether official camps or unofficial refugee status, is huge in a way that no one can actually cope with the numbers. I think it calls for, certainly like the minister said, is it possible at all to try and spare children the agony and consequence of war? I think this is a far-fetched dream, because at the end of the day, they're part of the community and the community is going to be impacted. At the same time, I think it calls for a different mindset completely when it comes to dealing with the situation as such. in being part of several initiatives that deal with education in refugee camps. So we have two displaced populations, the Syrian population that is in refugee camps and the internally displaced Syrian population. Over 50% of the entire Syrian population now is displaced. And close to 50% of children in school age are out of school. And if you look at a country that is a middle-class country and it has performed so well on all the indices that related to education in the past, this is a massive issue not only for Syria but for the entire region, the immediate region where refugees are. It is important, therefore, in my mind, that we look at three pillars that I think make a new mindset going forward. The first is a convergence between public, private, and volunteer approaches to educating students in fragile situations. The private sector is not there, not as a service provider, not as an investor in this, and especially we're talking about long-term displacement. And there is no outlook for a quick end for the Syrian crisis. And at the same time, even if there is an end in sight, we'll continue to face the same situation with the fragility that the children face, especially in education, for a very long time to come. So we need more private investment, and this is a necessity. It's not only a duty, but I think it's an opportunity. Not probably financial opportunity, but it's an opportunity to create sustainable services for children in fragile communities, whether internally displaced. This is a challenge because this is going to be under the political authority, and then you need to deal with it in a different way, or under international auspices in refugee camps. I think this is something that has to be addressed, and it has to be addressed quickly. I can talk more about the convergence, but I'd like to move to the other pillar now, which is institutionalizing informal education. A lot of informal education is already happening in the camps by volunteer groups, whether Syrian groups that come from inside Syria or Syrians from around the world. We have a huge, literally millions of Syrians living around the world, like all Arab communities have diasporas. And I think we need to create a certain set of standards to make these providers accountable to certain deliverables. This is something that can be done. It has not been done, but I think it is necessary as we try to organize the chorus of volunteer groups working in the camps. The third thing is one of the major issues we're facing is that even the students that are lucky enough to sit in class for primary education, they cannot be certified when they're done. Mm-hmm. And this is something that is proving to be a serious issue that face students as they continue their education or they go out to the job market. And I think this is something that has not been addressed because partly the world has not seen anything like the Syrian case so far, and it's calling for new approaches, more innovative, and more innovation actually in dealing with the issue. But at the same time, I think it is necessary because if you take the example of Lebanon, students sit in classes, but when they get to the 9th grade where they get a certification usually, or the 12th grade, they don't belong to the Lebanese system or the Syrian system. They didn't study the Lebanese curriculum or the Syrian curriculum, so what do? Who's going to certify them? So having a corporate certification there, the likes of Oracle, Microsoft, can definitely help. But having some sort of a global certification that is offered in such situations that will give students access later on to university education or to the job market, I think is extremely necessary. So we need really practical approaches in the camps. So far, most of the funding has been focused on relief. Understandably, I mean, people are worried about survival. And with the continuing exodus of Syrians outside the country, the need continues to grow, and people really, I mean, as generous as countries can be, at the end of the day, it's a limited resource. and we need to be able to have solutions from within. And this is the last thing I'm going to mention here. Clinton last night mentioned the story of the principal of a school in Shanghai, I think, where he built capacity within the school among teachers, and then he sent teachers to build capacity in schools around the country. And I think this is something that will need to be done inside refugee camps. Inside the camps, there are children, there are people that left with very little qualification, but at the same time, there are people with high qualification that are really qualified. And I think these individuals can be enabled as teachers. And you know, we've heard from the president of Rwanda last night that he was a refugee himself, and he was taught by a refugee teacher in a refugee camp. So we need to enable teaching within the camps from among refugees themselves, and I think that could be a huge part of trying to, not a solution, because there is no solution until there is a political solution in Syria, putting an end to the war and then start building the country again. But at least preserve as much as we can from the capacity that remains in this community. And I think, therefore, it is important to build an alliance between public, private, and volunteer organizations to institutionalize informal learning within the camps, using even technology, MOOCs, and there are Arabic MOOCs now. We need to institutionalize the delivery of that, that's for sure, and find a solution to licensing, or not licensing, certifying the education of children, and try to unleash the power within the camps to help with addressing these challenges.
Thank you very much. I think the issues that you're speaking about resonate well with everyone, and certainly there's that level of urgency, however, is extremely compelling. One of the issues that you spoke about is this idea that non-formal education is not getting the recognition that it receives. It has many dimensions as to why that is the case. Some of it has to do with the low quality of it. Others believe that because it doesn't lead to certification, it's not useful, and so many donors, as an example, wouldn't invest in it for that reason. Some parents as well, we've heard from Syrian refugees saying that, what's the use of sending my children to a non-formal education program if it's not going to be recognized and certified? Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that we know that in the case of refugees being in another country, that country may not have the capacity to scale up as fast as it needs to meet the needs of all children. So non-formal education becomes an important part of scaling up. Minister, can you talk to us a little bit about the role of non-formal education in South Sudan? How have you been dealing with it, and are there some parallel issues or opportunities that you see for scaling up non-formal education to support the formal education system?
Yeah. Now, this can be addressed at three levels. In terms of refugees, our law says that they will definitely study our curriculum, and therefore we give them examinations. So that we do. All the refugees in South Sudan who are studying in UN-run schools, we regulate the curriculum, and therefore they take examination just like other students. The difficulty then would be where do they go to study in terms of university? If they are able to join a private university or public university, an arrangement is made at that one, but the principle of recognition is there. Then, for this particular conflict, we have internally displaced people in UN camps. What we do is that they use the curriculum, and again, we give them examination. We don't discriminate them, because the irony, of course, that they are in the camp afraid of the government. But at the same time, the government is saying, well, we are able to serve you as if you were outside, except that the UN compound is controlled. For the displaced, it's normal in the sense that they're displaced within the government control area, and therefore they have no problem because they didn't leave the country. So our situation is a bit unique in that perspective. The second thing is, these all have to be looked within a context. Our context is a bit different because it's culmination of a bigger conflict out of which was born another conflict which is internal. Mm-hmm. And therefore, solutions ought to be understood within these varying degrees. We, for example, as a country, we have two problems. One is that our education system needed to be transformed. By the time when we began to understand what is happening in the whole system, because we had to do a general survey, we found out that we need to mobilize the public, the government, and the other institutions like Parliament. How do you mobilize them? First, you have to come up with concrete activities that create awareness that something is happening in the education sector. And that indeed, everyone else will have to understand this education system that exists is indeed a liability to the country because it will not take us anywhere. The second component about it is the funding. For example, in trying to solve the problem of girls' education, our partner suggested that we will only help you funding if you take a step as a government. Because if you have over 4,000 schools that cannot run like a normal school, you have challenges of teachers training, you have challenges of curriculum revision and so on, then you will have to come up with a plan. So we approached the government, we said, look, we will not do the transformation that you are requesting us to do if we as a government don't spend. So while the government is not interested to spend and increase the budget of education, you come up with concrete plan to say, I want all the schools to have water, to have toilets, to have all this, and it costs me this amount to do it. Roughly in our case, 60 million South Sudanese pounds. The government accepted. Then the partner said, okay, if you pay this grant to the schools directly, then we'll do the same for girls from grade 5 onward. Because girls begin to drop from grade 4 upward because of the pressure and so on. That means girls' education in South Sudan is improving because within the government, you have to come up with a plan to trick the government to accept the funding that they think they should not do. So while there's a normal budget for running the education system, you need also to work out a plan to get money, which allow you to do the things that you need to maintain the existing school. As such, others will then come in, like the GP and others. They will build schools. But this time they will do it with you already having in mind that you have secured that schools that exist are normal. The second aspect of it, which is very critical, is how do you do this transformation within the crisis? The country is at the crisis. How do you do it? If you, as a team of education, have a clear vision of what you want to do, you can transform the whole country concept of the conflict. Because the focus becomes the children now. And it's not about the politicians fighting themselves. So once children become the focus of the whole country, that they must go to school, they must live a distance, they must be protected and so on, then the politicians begin now to think differently because now it becomes too personal for them. Either the children are not in the country and therefore they don't care, or at least their relatives, and definitely every politician has got a relative, is in the same situation. So now the question is, who are you as a Minister of Education? Are you the government or you are a separate entity? It is creating the agenda, I think. And if you are able to create an agenda where education become a national commodity, a common ground for everybody, then the concept of peace will start from every family. If you go to countries like Iraq, Syria, you go to Libya and other places, it is not about the people. It's not about the children. It's about this militia group and the government fighting each other without concentrating on who is the victim. In South Sudan, we opted as a government, everybody, to keep education away from the conflict. And as a result, you try to create a semi-normal situation. And in fact, if you go across the country, the conflict is now like government and rebel fighting directly. So the population are no longer, the normal children are not longer directed. So the more you create peace environment, and it's not easy to do, you have to take a political decision as educationists, then the whole country will begin to look at the conflict from a purely different perspective.
I mean, I think what you're saying is extremely important, and it'll be interesting to look at, over time, how your strategy plays out and what are the successes that can be transferred elsewhere. But certainly a very different situation than what's happening in Syria. I want to open the floor up for questions. How much time left do we have, Gordon?
18 minutes.
Okay. So if you could prepare your questions, and I would kindly ask you to just introduce yourself and keep your question short so that we can get as long answers as possible. Unfortunately, there's still so much more to cover, but we've already covered a lot of ground, and I think that we're starting to form some really critical themes around what needs to happen going forward. And I want to come back to the issue of the role of the private sector specifically and the diaspora. And if I could ask you, who would like to talk about that? Private sector and diaspora specifically. Anyone? Would you like to talk about it some more?
About their role.
About their role. I mean, what role could they play going forward? And what role might they have played, for example, in Haiti or Afghanistan or Sudan? I'll let you think about that just for a moment and then open the floor perhaps for any questions. Do we have any questions or comments from... Is there a mic? Yes, please.
Just may I have some comments? You know that the candidature of Poland was very near from the one from Aziz, coming from two countries with war, with difficulties, with a government that is not supporting, and things have changed in Cambodia. Yesterday, of course, Cambodia was very sad not to win. The event was on TV, national TV, and 120,000 have voted for her. And now it has created a full movement, and I hope it will create a movement also for you, Aziz. Tomorrow she's going back. The Prime Minister is sending his son to collect her at the airport, and it is a huge movement. But it has changed, and we have been supported also by the diaspora abroad. VOA has transmitted, and I think events like this will change, perceiving the role we have played, creating the school for the blind and for the deaf, and integrating them into the government. So things can change, and I know Afghanistan is in a different situation than Cambodia, but I hope it will be, same movement, and then that is step by step, the people at the government realizing that what you do, what we do, is a gift for them and is something that is needed to be duplicated.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah. You know, I wouldn't want to have any government official receive me at the airport because he'll probably take me somewhere else, yeah? Or even call me because he'll be saying things I don't like.
Yeah, that's good. I think I need it.
Yeah, definitely.
We have a saying in Farsi that we do not expect any good from you. Please do not harm us. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, mine is rather a question that I would like to pose to the podium, and I don't know who should handle it. To me, in a global forum like this, we tend to celebrate our experiences and exchange views and different experiences, but did we really identify one challenge that is facing global education? Like, for example, this is a turbulent world where you have many children out of schools in Syria, in South Sudan, in Afghanistan, and so on. The greatest challenge here for the entire world is a situation where you have hundreds of children in refugee camps without a school and without any idea as to how long that conflict would end. What is the global response, apart from few money given to UNICEF, to fundraising here and there? And isn't it time for this forum to come with one big agenda as a global response, say, for example, to girls' education, child education, something like that? I don't know if somebody can.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Yeah. Could we take 2 more questions, and then I'll ask the panelists to just think about that. I think that particular question, if each of you could think about, if you had your choice of one thing that could be done at the global level to support education in fragile states, what would that be?
Hi, good morning. My name is Michelle Thomas, and I'm a grade 12 student in the Millennium School, Dubai. I really like the point as a student when you talked about global certification, especially for the refugees. I really like that point, and it's quite a unique approach. However, I was wondering, how do you plan to go about it? Are you going to be developing a new curriculum for these kind of refugee children? Or how are you going to be planning out on giving a global certification, especially in these crisis situations? Thank you.
If anyone answers that, you know, you're going to win a big prize globally.
Salam is, I think, the right person to do
Salam's going to come up with it. Was there a third question? Sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, James Pelly. I work in education investment. And Mr. Haykal, you mentioned MOOCs and they're increasingly translated to Arabic. I wonder, what do you perceive technology's role being going forward in education for fragile states, whether they're in conflict or in recovery?
Wonderful. So it's directly to...
I mean, across the board, but
okay,
particularly because it was raised by Mr. Haykal.
Sure. So we have 3 questions. If there was one thing that the global community needs to do to support education in fragile states, what would that be? And we have a very challenging question around how do you come up with a certification process for children in education settings? What curriculum do they learn, and who tests them and who certifies them? Of course, leave it to the youngest person here to ask the most challenging question. And a third question around how do you mobilize MOOCs and technology in support of refugee education? Who would like to start? Aziz?
Yeah, I think as a person that I've lived my childhood time in the refugee camps, and then later on I work with the refugees. I think my experience can be something that can be shared with my colleagues, especially with the Syrian and also with the South Sudan. The first thing that you have to do with the children, I think, is to create an environment for them that they should feel themselves relieved and calm, because they're suffering from hopelessness, from frustration, and all refugees, that is a problem for them. They do not see anything as a light in front of their eyes to go and to work, and this leads them to lots of problems. So for you, the first thing is how to create this environment to protect morally and psychologically the kids. Then the other point is that your education system should be focused based on those facilities that the refugees themselves can offer. This is very important because the most fragile, condition for the refugees that they are relying on the donor, assistances. And that is a project based. Sometimes it can come, sometimes even it is neglected. So it poses lots of problems for the refugees. As I was, most of the time you even look for a single piece of bread, to come, to help you there. For that, I think you have to mobilize a community to put a list in front of them, and in that list, all their needs should be regarded, including education as a prime thing, because including doesn't offer you with food, but it gives a meaning on your existence. And this is very important for a refugee child. And any person in that status, especially as a teacher, can help the kids with this hope, with a protection, sense of protections, that they should feel that if even they have very small minimum of money or thing to live with, but they can be still optimistic and hopeful. And that should be part or incorporated in the textbook and the education system and the methodology that you are applying there in the classroom.
Yeah, I think with regard to the refugees, for me and many others, we live all our life in refugee life. And one of the difficulties, I had the opportunity to leave the country 2 years after I finished my secondary school. So I didn't have that difficulty because then I went to university. But I think generally, refugees' main problem with regard to certification is something that global can be handled easily, in a sense that you always use the curriculum of the host country. Mm. So there is no problem about that. What is the problem is who is teaching you. If the host country and the UN agencies can agree on the training of the teachers who train you, so to the level that the country will have no problem of accepting students, that is a good entry point. For the displaced people, it's a bit tricky because depending on how tricky in a sense that you are displaced within the country, you could be internally displaced under the category of the UN. But also you can be internally displaced as a normal citizen who moved from a particular, but is still loyal to the government. These things, people don't talk about them because they talk about the refugees or the displaced as individuals, but not as children. Once the focus now moves into education, I think the debate will be much better. And even people will begin to listen. I think the point she raised is critical because it's simply saying, look at us as people who are growing and we don't know when we'll go back. Mm-hmm. For the parents, it's different because the parents who are with them, they look at their children welfare now. Mm-hmm. But for the children, they're looking at what will happen if I stay 30 years in the camp. Mm-hmm. The best example would be Palestinian in Syria, in Lebanon, in Jordan, and in other places. How do you call that? Almost 80 years you are displaced, you are a refugee, so the chance of going, so where is your real home? These must be looked into from generational perspective. I think that would be the best way to do it. You handle it from that. In our case, it's different in the sense that it is internal conflict that displace people in UN camp who feel that they're not safe, but the same people, they come out of the camp, they spend the whole day in some instances, and they go back. So yeah, in other instances, they can't because they're afraid of the environment. So it's complex. The situation has to be studied from.
And I think just on that point, one of the critical things that we're hearing from all of you is this notion that we need to challenge the system and the policies in place to work for people. We know that one of the issues for Syrian refugees at the moment is the fact that there are too many requirements for paperwork from a country that's not able to provide. People cannot go back to Syria and get papers that say that they've completed grade 3 or grade 4. Yet that's a requirement for them to enter the system sometimes, or even to sit for an exam. So how can the international community work around that and come up with another certification system? I don't think we're going to come up with the answer for that. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to give your final remarks, and then I'm going to move to you to answer the third question, if you don't mind. Please go ahead.
About the challenge, I think that it's an obligation now for all educators to reimagine learning. It's not possible to continue to use traditional strategy. And fortunately, we have possibility to use technology now, like tablet, like laptop. And one of the problems for the teacher, students have the same information at the same time like the teacher. So it's a challenge for the teacher to train to use this technology, because if not, they will not be able to continue to teach.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, that's
an
critical.
interesting idea.
Can I give you the last word?
Well, this is a big responsibility. Well, I'll try to answer the question and your question about diaspora and the role of business. I think what is missing is a universal, cohesive effort to address these issues. So agencies are working on their own. They're going out of their way to help. But is it coordinated? If it's not, then we're going to continue to face problems. And that applies to everything. So there is a huge constituency of Syrians and Sudanese outside their countries that can help. But if we want really to make the pieces fall in place, then we need to have a strategy in which they can participate and actually deliver their value. And without it, I don't think even as well-intended their contribution is not going to be meaningful in the larger picture. And
How do you do that?
And that we need a strategy. We need for example, in the Syrian case, we need a body that is responsible about coordinating education effort, like we have a body that's coordinating relief effort. And that answer probably it will help answer your question. There is no problem in the world that is too hard to solve if we really put our minds to it. And finding a global certification for refugees, as long as we maintain a certain standard, we follow a certain procedure, we can get that certification. I mean, we get certification today in the world for things that we perceive we have done or others perceive we have done, and they do it, but they don't do it for children. But regardless of certification, I think what's important in the situation of Syria to focus on learning. Students will have to learn whether they get certified or not. And I think this is extremely necessary. So we should find ways also to entice parents and children to learn in the camps, whether they'll have a chance later on to continue education or pursue a job. So that's number two. The third, just to go back to the point of technology, because it's extremely important. And I think this is something that is a low-hanging fruit. We can establish computer labs across the camps. There are few success stories in some of the camps, in the Syrian camps in Turkey and in Jordan. In Lebanon, we don't have camps because of the political situation in the country, and by UN jargon, they're called tented settlements. So they're not camps, they're not official camps. But if we are able to set up computer labs in the camps, and this is something that can be done easily, it's relatively low cost, with broadband access, and we give the children a chance to get exposed to content, whether through MOOCs, delivered informally or informally. I think this is extremely, extremely necessary. And I think people are going to start to realize it as we move forward. Now we need to enable Again, we need to enable teachers, and we need to enable the camp itself to handle such a situation, and that includes training super users within the camps, teachers, training of teachers within the camps, training of trainers within camps is going to prove very helpful, whether on technology or other things. So the platforms are there, and the platforms are open source. The MOOCs are there, and they're mostly free of charge. What you need is computer labs. What you need is rooms, simple rooms, and they can be built really at a very effective cost. And there is research done, Maysa, you know it, at the American University of Beirut, where they actually managed to build a prototype of a temporary classroom that refugees themselves can build, actually, with material that is available in the neighborhood of refugee camps. So it is indeed a low-hanging fruit, but you need that body that makes it part of the strategy to address the situation. Otherwise, everyone is well-intended, everyone is spending money, everyone is investing time, but are we really driving the point home that we need these kids not to go out and have no other options, but the options that are sold to them by people that do not want the interests of the children or the region.
Thank you very much. I just would like to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for not only sharing your views today, but for the dedication that you show day in and day out to helping solve a huge challenge in your countries. I think that engaging people like yourselves in these discussions at the global level is critical to create a better architecture for education in emergencies going forward. There is a very important discussion taking place right now among key players around how donors can better coordinate, shorten the period of response on the ground. But I think some of the issues that you raised today around local ownership, using the talents of the refugees themselves, learning from other examples, and making sure that that education is about the future, strengthening the individuals and the future of the countries are all such important concepts that must be part of the policy discussion going forward. So thank you very much. Thank you also for attending, and I hope you found it an interesting and useful discussion.